to keep their cameras off or keep them on if you like. I know that there's a few new people joining on today, so I'd like to just go through some quick introductions. Just say who you are, what you do, and what makes you happy. We'll start with that. And Liz, you're up on my next to me right first, so I'll just go with you first.
Thank you. I'm Liz. I'm a coach, trainer and facilitator based here in Cardiff in Wales. Lots of things makes me happy, but open water is my thing. Anything with open water, sea, lake, river, yeah.
So you're a swimmer then?
Swimmer, kayaker, paddleboarder, yeah.
Amazing. Love that. I think we had somebody on here who said, was it you, Victoria, who said somebody was saying they go swimming in Brighton a lot. It might have been somebody else. I'm getting confused.
It wasn't me, but I was just about to buy a outdoor swimming wetsuit. So I thought it might just be one hobby too many.
Yeah. Also, by the way, if you would like me to skip over you, just pop in the chat that you're not, you're having your lunch or whatnot, or you'd like me to skip over. Adrian, you can go ahead next.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Like Rosie mentioned, I just joined the Happiness Index on Monday. So as you can hear from the accent, I'm a French national, but I'm very lucky to live in Tuscany. I'm going to be back in France in about 3 months. Spent about 20 years in the corporate world as an HR leader, and decided to completely change scenery. Got my executive coaching certification last year, and then decided to join the Happiness Index this year. So really looking forward to working with the team. That makes me very happy, meeting Matt Fidden, and we kind of hit it off, and we just realized we were seeing eye to eye. So I just wanted to get involved in the Happiness Index. So what makes me happy? A lot of things also, but I have to say lately I've been starting playing tennis again. I was playing tennis a lot as a teenager, and I started playing again, and it's incredible how happy it made me to feel like I was maybe when I was 15 years old. So kind of a jump back in time, but really happy to meet you all.
Thank you, Adrian. Excited to continue working with you as well. For those who have just joined, we're just going through some introductions of who you are, what you do, and what makes you happy. And if you'd like me to skip over you, just pop in the chat that you're happy for me to skip over. Laura, you can go ahead next.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Laura. I am the People and HR Assistant at Digital Theatre. Only recently joined, so about a month and a half in, and it's all going really well. Something that makes me happy, I definitely say, is my family, particularly my nephew. He's just over 1.5, and I mean, he's exhausting, but he makes me really happy.
Thank you, Laura. It's good to have you in Happiness and Humans too.
Thank you.
Hey, Katherine, how are you?
Hi, Rosie and everyone. Sorry I'm a bit late. I'm well.
It's okay. Oh, and are you happy to do a quick introduction of yourself and what makes you happy?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Katherine. Serial job changer, new to HR. Worked for about 6 months last year in a team, and I met Happiness and Humans through ex-employees from another company I worked for. Yeah, what makes me happy? I don't know about happy, but grateful. I'm so grateful to be home with my family in Cape Town at the moment. I'm normally based in London, so yeah, happy and grateful.
Glad you're able to make it home, Katherine. I know it's kind of difficult to get over to that part of the world at the moment, but good to have you on here.
Thank you.
Victoria, you're up next on my screen. Oh, it's okay.
Sorry, there's 2 of us. Is it me or should I go? So the other Victoria's already been, hasn't she? Sorry. Yeah, my name's Victoria. I work for the Rugby Football League in HR, and what makes me happy is my family, and like someone just mentioned, their niece, the nephew, and my nieces. They make me really happy. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Victoria. Who have I not gone to yet? Hazel, I know that you have your camera and microphone off. You're welcome to do an introduction of yourself if you like, or I can skip over you.
It's fine. I'm Hazel. I work as a pension officer in the education sector, and I suppose what makes me happy is playing sport. I love playing hockey. So yeah.
That's something that's really big. Where I'm from in Minnesota is hockey. So.
Oh, okay. I'm in the UK. It's really big here. So.
Well, thank you, Hazel. Okay, I think we've gone over everybody. Victoria, since you are the guest star of our show, thank you for coming on, and I'm really excited to discuss human performance with you and how we can practice better self-management as we ease out of lockdown. Could you do a quick introduction of yourself and what makes you happy?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking me to join today, Rosie. I like being described as a guest star. I've never been described as a guest star before, so that makes me happy. So my background's a little bit varied as well, a bit of a career hopper as well. I started my sort of formal career in the military as an RAF officer, and really in civilian terms, I was an operational manager for a large team of specialists and moved around quite a lot in that role, both in the UK and abroad. But when I left the Air Force, I was a little bit lost because I didn't know what else to do. In the world, the RAF world is kind of a world in itself, a world inside a world. But I had a law degree, so I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll carry on my training and I'll qualify as a lawyer, which I did. But my passion had always been people management, working with people, understanding them. And so I had to really think about that choice to be a lawyer, because it can be very removed from that subject. So I chose to do employment law and specialise in that because I felt that was the closest I could get to working with people within the bounds of the law. And to some extent it was, because we work with a lot of HR professionals to help them, with their employment law and other issues. But it was still one step removed to some extent from actually affecting individual lives. So during my employment law career, I progressed more into HR training, people management and development. And so now I am still a practicing employment lawyer, but I'm also a leadership coach and trainer. And I really love doing that. I've got a real passion for it. And I think my career has enhanced my passion for working with people because of the different environments I've experienced, but also my childhood background. I moved around a lot. I think I went to 7 different schools. I lived in about 6 different cities. And what that means is you're constantly having to read people. You're constantly having to integrate yourself into new environments. You're constantly having to adapt. And I think that just gave me a fine tuning for perceptiveness of other people. And I think my passion around understanding others and how we all interact with each other and how we work together or not work together, as the case may be, grew really from my childhood and then developed in my career. So I think for me, my childhood is actually important in informing where I am in my career. So that's me in a nutshell. And, what makes me happy? I've chased happiness in the past. I can definitely admit to that. And I think we all want to be happy. But actually what makes me happy now is not being happy all the time and having a balanced life. Because for me, peace and contentment makes me happy. To know that I've got a life that I'm comfortable with episodes of happiness in between, like seeing my children laugh and smile, taking them swimming, playing tennis, which I've just started again as well. But knowing that I can go back to that stable state of contentment because my life's in balance, that's for me is what I would say is happiness overall. So kind of peace interspersed with highs of, isolated incidents of happiness. And it was really important for me to make that distinction, because you can't be happy all the time in the way that the word is commonly used, because it's too high energy. We'd all collapse, we'd all run out of steam. So finding that balance in my life was really important. But I love it, I love looking now for those moments of joy and high that I can experience along the way.
Mm-hmm. I have to say that's probably one of the most profound answers I've heard to the happy question. Has really thank you, Victoria.
It's an important one for me.
It's true though. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with clients, especially using one of our tools, Employee Voice. So you're measuring happiness of employees, and people ask us, what should we shoot for? Why aren't our scores always high? But you can't always be happy as a human being. It's just not possible. It's just not. We're gonna be sad sometimes. We're gonna go through hard times, but that's okay. So we love that message. Thank you, Victoria.
No, that's okay.
My first question for you, as we kind of start a discussion around human performance, is going along with that as we is at a lockdown point. How can we look after ourselves in our personal lives and at work?
I suppose when I looked at that question, the first thing that sprung to mind for me is that we should always look after ourselves, whether we're coming out of a situation like lockdown or not. And I had a period in my life where I really didn't look after myself, and I spectacularly hit a wall. I don't like to do things by half, so I really went for it. And really that was just down to me not looking after myself, even though I could blame lots of other people in my environment for that happening, which is what I did at the time. But what I learned from that experience was, one, how to lead a completely different life, which is why, sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing that can happen to you. But it also emphasized the importance of self-care and the fact that, okay, yes, a good environment can help us be who we want to be and how we want to be, and other people can certainly influence that. But ultimately, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, the responsibility is on you to look after yourself. So lockdown is a scenario we're in now where we do need to still look after ourselves, but I do think it endures in all of our life circumstances. But I think with lockdown in particular, I'm a really emotionally driven person, which I find great sometimes and a real pain sometimes, because it can be up and it can be down, and it can be energy enhancing, but it can be energy draining, and it can be, all those things. And because we're emotionally led human beings, emotions register in us much faster than our thoughts. We tend to run with our emotions without even realizing it. So this whole scenario around lockdown and coming out of it is evoking a lot of emotions in people, and we're responding to it, not necessarily knowing that we're responding to our emotions rather than what's rationally happening. So, for me, I have to slow down and let rational thought actually come in here for once, because a lot of the time I'd say to you, it's good to understand your emotions. It's good to understand how they drive our behaviors, and to let them be, not to hide them. As quite a few clients that I've coached have said, I've been trying to hide my emotions. But actually in this scenario, there's a lot of emotional noise here. So maybe it is a good time to actually slow down and let those more rational thought processes come in, so that we can actually stop and think about what's actually going on for us. What's been working, what hasn't been working, where do I enjoy this? Actually, where is it a challenge, if I'm really honest with myself? Mm-hmm. And then there's, of course, what can I control and what can't I control? So, we're in a scenario now where our lives are different. Some of it we will like, some of it we won't like, but there'll also be aspects that will change that we can control and some we can't. And I think that's important that we accept that, so that we don't have unrealistic expectations of what's about to come. And, that we don't compare our situation to others, because we're all individuals. So what I need to do to look after myself coming out of lockdown is going to be different to every other person on this call. What I need for my personal work-life balance is going to be different to every person on this call. And what I personally can cope with from a resilience perspective, what I believe in, all of those things are different. So really, maybe it's a good time actually for individuals to take responsibility for what they actually want from life and the parameters they're prepared to accept. Because at the end of the day, this was, if we want to look at it from quite a harsh perspective, I suppose, this was a temporary situation in response to a threat. It was never meant to be permanent. The situation we're in now was never meant to be a permanent situation. But the great thing is that we've learned a lot along the way, and we have been able to experiment with doing things very differently. So the best way I think we can look after ourselves is to take the good stuff from that and apply it as best as we can going forward, but without the fear, I suppose, without listening to the noise around what might go wrong or what might not be helpful to us in the future. Because I think starting from a place of fear is always going to be a negative. If we start from, like, this has worked really well, can this be carried forward? This is what I'd like ideally, but that's not practical. This is what I now know I want as my work-life balance. So can I stay in this career, or do I have to change? what's more important to me, because at the end of the day, the business has got needs as well. So I can't have everything I want necessarily. So I think there's a lot we can do to look after ourselves, but the main point I think is to take personal responsibility and maybe have to make some tough calls around what you do and don't want to do going forward.
And that's something that kind of came up in our roundtable on Tuesday, was understanding there's going to be things that employees want, and you can try to accommodate for them as much as possible, but you also have to find a balance of what the business needs in the time. Yeah, that was a great point that was brought up. And something you've mentioned before as well is that a lot of there's been a lot of scaremongering, and perhaps that maybe we're, you know, putting too much of a dramatization on it. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this, on your views on this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to be a bit careful what you say on this, because everyone is different, and everyone's position in terms of their own anxieties are going to be, you know, relevant to them. So this is not to take away from any of that at all. But I still personally feel that from everything that I've read and I see, we are almost giving out the message that this is going to be a difficult process that we can't manage, and we're going to have to make lots of changes and adjustments, and people are going to find it very, very difficult. But that may be true, but why start from that point? Why start from a point where we're putting everyone on the back foot by saying you're going to find this really difficult, you're going to need your confidence boosted, you're going to need to find a different way to travel to work, you're going to need to do all these things that are generally quite negatively framed, when in fact, you know, we are in a situation and we need to accept that, and we need to accept that change happens. So, okay, the lockdown change was quite dramatic and overnight to some extent, and we don't normally put ourselves in those positions, but where we are now is just another part of that change process. And I think one of the biggest things that holds people back from self-development or change or anything is really acceptance. So all I believe we're doing, and all I'm doing along the way, is accepting the situation as it is at the time, and then managing it best I can going forward. And so the scaremongering, if you like, is almost going against that principle, because it's saying, you know, what if this doesn't work, or what happens if you can't cope, and how are you going to manage? But you know, people generally do find a way if we give them the right support and we give them the right guidance, and we don't let them concentrate on external factors. So if we move away from, you know, concentrating on, I'd rather this didn't happen, or I don't know what I'm going to do about this, or this is that person's fault, or the company could be doing more, to this is the situation now, we're easing out of lockdown, I have to now cope with what's happening and make decisions and move forward, how can I best do that? Then that's a far more positive approach, I believe, than listening to, right, I better get myself on a confidence course, I better get myself on an anxiety management course, I better go and change roles, or whatever it is, you know, that's, you know, being sort of fed into our minds through a lot of publicity. So I'm not really, I suppose I don't want to criticize anyone's individual situation, because, you know, we're all in a different situation, and the anxieties and fears out there are, you know, are real and genuine for many people. But I think also, what do you do about it? That's fine, we have to accept that. So for each individual, what do you do next then? That's where we are. And I'd like to see more messages like that out there personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes when you are, you know, you're looking forward to going back into work, or you start getting some anxieties or fears, your mind can kind of get carried away with itself. So going back to just the basics of like what you just covered. And going back to that point you made about support from organizations, what would you say is the best way that an organization or employer could support an employee going back into the office, or maybe moving to a more hybrid remote working model?
I think employers are in a bit of a difficult situation at the moment, actually, because, you know, we have to a large extent carried on being able to work from home, or in a very different way anyway to the way we were working before. And it has put a lot more emphasis on individual need than I think we've ever had before. So companies are now faced with having to balance their business needs against the needs and to some extent people might think rights of an individual, but that's going to be very difficult to do for every single individual within an organisation unless you're extremely small. So what I think employers need to do is to, you know, step back to some extent and give themselves plenty of reflective time to think about what's happened here and where they are. But what I think will be critical going forward is a balance between meeting their business needs and listening to the individuals they've got working for them and finding solutions that work for everybody in the main, and experimenting. So, you know, what might work in the first few weeks might not be a longer term solution, but at least they're, you know, if they're listening to what the individuals have got to say and they're reaching some sort of compromise or balance, then they can, you know, they can be showing that they're trying, and that they're also willing to be flexible and adaptive as things progress and as different, you know, results are identified, or different needs are identified. You know, I think there's going to be hopefully a really great future ahead for companies and employees with this mix between a more flexible work style and meeting the business requirements. And, you know, there is flexible working laws, but they're nothing compared to what we've been able to do in the last year, and it has worked. So perhaps there'll even be a change in the law, I don't know. But, you know, it just shows what's possible. I think the challenge for employers is not worrying about what other people are doing and concentrating on their own business, and also reaching that balance between doing what's right for them and doing what's right for their people. But it will be really important, I think, in my view, that leaders do their own self-development, because to be able to understand the needs of other people, they have to understand themselves first and be able to at least try and reach that point of empathy, which I think we'll go on to in a minute, so that they can actually find solutions that work. Yeah,
definitely. And on the empathy point, I know we spoke about this as well in our roundtable, but I don't know if anybody else has seen this. I know that I've spoken to a lot of business leaders, and they've seen a lot more empathetic empathy from the senior leadership team. And can you just maybe branch a little bit on that and the importance of the empathy part with senior leadership teams?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it'd be lovely to see who's experienced this as well, because in the coaching I've been doing over the last year or so, I would say that there has been a dramatic move towards leaders wanting to be more empathetic and to understand their teams or the individuals that they're responsible for better, and also their personal families actually as well, has crept into coaching a lot more than it would do in my experience normally. And I suppose, you know, what do we mean by empathy? So for me, empathy means, as far as possible, being able to put yourself into the shoes of the other person, both from a thinking perspective, but also from a how they feel perspective. You know, we'll never be able to do that completely, because we can never be the other person. But the more that we can understand human behaviour, so self-development, the more that you can relate that knowledge to understanding other people, which is why I think the leader's own personal development is so key in them getting the next stage of this lockdown process right. But so I think being empathetic is one thing, and I do feel a bit for leaders sometimes, because one minute they're supposed to be trusted leaders, then they're supposed to be human-centric leaders, now they've got to be empathetic leaders. I don't know what's next, you know. But you know, it's all part and parcel really of leadership qualities, isn't it? And I think we keep labeling these things, but really we're just asking them to be good leaders in the round. And I think the tricky point with empathetic leadership is that empathy doesn't equal solution. So being able to empathize, oh, I can't even say that. Anyway, you know what I mean, with other people. I don't know what that was. There you go, these things happen. Doesn't mean that you have to give them the solution that they want in order to be a good person, if you like. All it really means is that you are willing and able to at least understand how they feel and how something affects them as much as you can, and then try and find a solution together. Because that's my slight worry with this leadership sort of labeling, that people will take it that to be empathetic, you have to give people what they want.
Yeah.
And for me, the two aren't the same thing. You know, it's a great quality, and not everybody can do it, actually. Some people find it very, very difficult to do, but it isn't the answer. So it's a style, and it will be helpful, because I think if someone knows that you at least understand their position, they will believe that you're dealing with them as fairly as you can. And that you're listening, which is really important to us. You know, we like being listened to, we like being valued. So I think there's a lot of pressure on leaders at the moment to meet individual needs. And I think that it's going to take a little bit of courage, actually, from leaders to be able to know what the best route to take is in terms of people management going forward. And it does leave a puzzle for HR and other people managers as well to solve, because the leaders are likely to come to them for advice and guidance, but they will probably have their own strong views as well on what they want to achieve. And I do hope, in a way, that HR and people managers generally don't get saddled with a lot of the responsibility of making some really tough, you know, people and administrative decisions around this, because, you know, as a form of delegation, if you like, because it's not something that's easily tackled. But I think, you know, like I say, if the companies work with their people and they experiment, and I think if everybody is realistic and kind, actually, to each other, then there's potentially, you know, an amicable way forward for everybody. And I think being kind, actually, a kind leader, that can be the next one. Yeah. I think being kind is overlooked quite a lot, actually, in leadership, because not just in leadership, actually, in terms of the workplace, because leaders have a responsibility, but we all have an individual responsibility as employees as well, to help, to do our best, to be kind to each other, to be kind to our senior people as well as our peers and colleagues. And this is a difficult time, so actually kindness is key at the moment to moving forward.
Yeah, and I guess it's trying to find a balance of being empathetic but not oversensitizing it so that everybody is relying on that one leader to help them through everything. It's trying to encourage people, enable people, I guess, to have good self-management and being able to understand how to work their way through going back into this change that we're about to approach, going back into the offices and whatnot. So I wanted to touch on, I know that we've kind of gone over a little bit about it, but improving our human performance is something that was about what we're talking about here. But what is human performance exactly? How would you define that?
Oh, how would I define human performance? I suppose what I would look at there is how we manage ourselves and how we can do that in order to get the best results from our lives that we want to.
Okay.
And, you know, performance doesn't have to be in work. You know, it can be in our personal lives or in our role as a mother or a friend or any aspect, really. So human performance for me is really around understanding yourself. And until I did this, I don't think I could have ever come on the journey I've been on now, because I didn't have the level of self-awareness I needed in order to mature and change. And I only got that experience by being coached myself, you know, and learning, because learning is key. And I knew at the start, and I know now that never ends. You know, that's an ongoing journey. Understanding myself will still be going on the day I die, because every day I change to some extent. Every day I get new life experiences and I react to situations differently. So I have to keep reiterating, you know, my processes of personal development. And that's quite a commitment, to be honest. So, you know, people who are seriously committed to personal change are basically undertaking a lifelong journey. But what they, you know, so I suppose if we go back to human performance, it's how do you want to be the best you can be, and what can you do in order to achieve that? Well, the first step for me would be to accept who and what you are now. So if you can't do that, you can't really move forward, because if you're pretending to be someone you're not, then you're not starting in the right place. And we know now, you know, that the there's a complex interaction between brain and body in terms of our human intelligence system. And if our thinking heads are telling us one thing, but our body is telling us something else, it's not right. You know, we're not in sync, we're not in balance, and we're just pretending that something is right when it's not. So we really have to get to the point of, this is who I am, and this is what I am, and good and bad, I have to just accept that all for now, because then I can look at it. Once I can look at it, I can start thinking about if I want to change anything or if I don't, because, you know, who am I to say that someone who presents as quite rude should change? He or she might be perfectly happy being rude to people. That choice is theirs, but not if they don't know it exists. There isn't a choice if you don't know what your behaviours are. So, you know, so understanding yourself and accepting who and what you are is first, and then learning. I think learning is key then. So what drives my behaviour? What makes me achieve better or perform well? When do I feel at ease, in balance? Why do I respond to life the way I do? How do my emotions manifest in my behaviours? Because actually that's what's generally happening. Our emotions equal our behaviour to a very large extent. And the only way to moderate that is to slow down and to practice a different result. So, you know, I suppose an example might be, you know, if you're public speaking and you're, you know, emotionally anxious and you're talking too fast, and you know that's happening, you can slow down and make yourself talk at a slower pace. But if you don't know it's happening, you can't. You'll just be constantly responding to what's going on for you. And that will be mainly driven by, you know, your instincts and your emotions. So learning to observe ourselves, learning about what makes us behave the way we do. So that's, you know, all of the human intelligence work around mind and body, around how our brains work, is really key to understanding. And the other aspect that's been really important for me in human behaviour is really understanding your values and beliefs, because they're an anchor. So if you've got all of this learning going on and you're trying to practice some sort of change to enhance your performance in whatever area it is you're looking at, you're going to hit hard times and you're going to hit good times, and you're going to get knocked off track by other people or the environment, or by you just letting yourself down from time to time. But if you can anchor yourself to your belief in what you're doing and what your values are, then you've got a way to steady yourself. You know, and I really believe belief is the key to resilience. So if you really believe in what you're doing, you can get through it, because you can regenerate the energy you need to keep your resilience levels where they are, where they need to be, to keep going. And ultimately, you know, I believe it's all about balance. So what we're really achieving and what we're trying to achieve is a balanced life where we feel, as I mentioned right at the start, you know, generally calm and peaceful, or trust would be another way to describe that in the workplace, you know, an environment of trust where things are stable, so that our energy levels are at, you know, at a level that are useful to us when we need to accelerate that in order to do something like try changing or try experimenting or put ourselves in an uncomfortable position. So the key to human performance, in my view, is all starts again with self-development. Understand yourself first, and then look at where you want to change, what you want to change, and do that by anchoring yourself in your values and beliefs, and also knowing where you're going. So have a goal. You don't have to necessarily even hit that goal, but you need a goal to aim for in order to give you some sort of direction to travel in.
Thank you, Victoria. I think like some of the key messages I've gotten out of you so far is, you know, that balance bit and most things in life, and kind of asking yourself those simple questions to understand where you currently sit. I think that's so important. Did anybody have any questions for Victoria on anything that she just went over so far? I know that that's a lot for me to reflect on.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Go ahead, Adrian.
Thanks, Victoria. Very interesting insights. You started off by talking about the fact that maybe earlier on in your career, you didn't have that ability to step back, and at some stage, I mean, you kind of reach a point. I mean, you use the phrase I hit a wall and hit it hard because I was just all in. So, and I think a lot of us at some stage had this almost kind of epiphany to say, I need to sit down with myself, understand who I am, what I want to do, and what are my core values, you know, what do I need to do to take care of myself? So what would you say to maybe a younger crowd into the workplace today, getting hit by everything that's happening, to make sure that they don't have to go through that traumatic experience, to be able to make sure they take care of themselves, you know, within the context that we live?
Yeah. I mean, you certainly don't have to hit a wall in order to do this. I just didn't know any better at the time. So no, I think it's a really important question, because it's so easy to get caught up in life, whether that, you know, whatever aspect of it is that's carrying you away. And I don't know what it's like now, but certainly when I went through the education system up to, you know, the point of leaving university, and even in the early sort of career days, that wasn't an aspect of development that was ever really talked about or looked at. So you were never really taught to sit back, reflect on what you really, really want, what your values are, what your beliefs are, what your goals are, how you balance that with the kind of lifestyle that you want and what your drivers are. So, you know, just, you know, take law, for example. It's very easy to go from being a certain person to being very financially driven very quickly, because you get involved in that environment and it's all geared up towards that, and you get swept away with it. And you certainly aren't encouraged to sit back and take time out to reflect, actually, do I really want this? Or did I actually like having my Fridays off with my kids? I mean, I was coaching someone recently, and we were coaching for about 2 or 3 sessions, and he was getting a lot of anxiety around how he could get promoted, you know, and how he could prove himself. And when we got to the nitty-gritty of it all, he didn't want to be promoted at all. He just didn't know what else to want. So he had spent all that time worrying about this promotion, and when he'd gone through the practical aspects of it, like working away from home a lot, high level of responsibility, you know, more people to manage, didn't need the money actually either. It was almost like seeing him take a sigh of relief. He's like, oh. But he had to fill that gap with something, because now he didn't want to be promoted. He didn't know what to do and how to have any value at work, because he didn't know what to strive for. So I think with young people, I think it's really important that we maybe build this reflective, more long-term thinking into their lives, so that, you know, they can almost give themselves checkpoints where they say, is this still what I want? Is this still where I want to go? Am I still doing the right things to get me where I want to be? Because, you know, for some reason we don't tend to do that much for ourselves. I think there is more awareness around it now than there was when I was slightly younger, and in the young worker category. But it's still, I don't think, you know, it's not really built into our working environments. I know we have appraisals and that sort of thing, or whatever people call it now, but it's not really that, what you've just described. It's not really that. How are you making the really important decisions in your life that are going to affect your, not only your career, but more importantly, your well-being? Because what I learned quite dramatically was, without well-being, you haven't got the rest of it anyway. So there's no point. And I think that employers can help there by encouraging those discussions and not putting pressure on people to try and be who they are not, and encourage them down routes that they don't necessarily want to go down, because they have no other measure of value that they can attach themselves to in an organisation.
Thanks, Victoria.
Okay.
Well, that's all I had for questions for you today, Victoria. So if anybody else has any other questions that they'd like to ask, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I think we might stop it here. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. It was a really, really insightful session. I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of that with us. If people do want to get in touch with you, can I share your contact details in my newsletter this week?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Thank you.
That sounds good. All right.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Victoria.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time, guys.
Bye.